How's it going, guys? This video is going to be about my post-fight thoughts on the fight that took place over the weekend between Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. If you watched the pre-fight videos I did on this fight, you'll know that I was picking Billy Joe Saunders to win the fight. I was also laying money on Billy Joe Saunders. So obviously I'm still hurting over the loss that I took on the weekend. But I mean, that's part of the game. So anyways, Canelo Alvarez victorious by 8th round stoppage. Billy Joe Saunders failed to come out of his corner after the 8th round. Mark Tibbs pulled Billy Joe out the fight. He said he could not see out of his eye. We've heard back from Eddie Hearn that I think he has 3 fractures to his orbital socket. So definitely is quite a serious injury, similar to the ones Cal Brook and Daniel Dubois have suffered in the past. It's not an injury that happens commonly in fighting, but I mean, we've seen it happen before, and it is a serious injury. I think if you keep fighting, you could risk losing your sight. So obviously they've said Mark Tibbs made the right decision to pull Billy Joe Saunders out of the fight. Now, let's talk how the fight played out and how it was going, and what my thoughts were on what had happened in those 8 rounds. Now, I had the fight 5-3 to Billy Joe Saunders. I know the judges all had it in favor of Canelo. 2 of the judges had it quite wide for Canelo. I had it 5-3 for Billy Joe Saunders. I think similarly to what Chris Mannix had it. I gave the first round to Billy Joe Saunders. I know some people said Billy Joe Saunders started off slow. I kind of disagree with that, because after the first round, you even heard the commentators talking about, Canelo often will take that first round to just look at what his opponent's doing and then make adjustments. So Billy Joe Saunders started faster than Canelo did. In my opinion, he won the first round using the jab. Canelo was, coming forwards and looking to counter with body shots and stuff like that, but I liked what I saw from Billy Joe Saunders. I thought he landed more punches. He was definitely the busier of the 2 fighters, and he landed, the more shots in the first round. Now, Billy Joe Saunders came out and he didn't move as much as a lot of people were expecting, and as much as I was expecting either. But I'd listened to an interview with Ben Davison, who was in Billy Joe Saunders' corner the day before the fight, or the day of the fight, and he had said, they were talking about watching how Mayweather beat Canelo, and they said, if you watch the Mayweather fight, which is true, Mayweather came out in the first round and he wasn't just on his bike. He came out and he met Canelo in the center of the ring, to try and gain Canelo's respect. And I believe that's what Billy Joe Saunders came out and tried to do. He came out and he tried to hold ground a bit to try and gain Canelo's respect, and try to control the center of the ring, because you don't want to obviously end up with your back on the ropes or just giving up too much ground, because that's not a good look to the judges. So I believe he tried to hold his ground, as that's better aesthetically for what the judges are looking at. As we've seen in the past in Canelo fights, they simply give Canelo the round because he's the aggressor, he's coming forward, and so I think Billy Joe was trying to not move as much. Also, it helps to conserve energy if you're not just moving too much. You don't want to waste energy when you're in there against a top level operator like Canelo, because he'll make you pay in those later rounds if you're just burning up too much energy. But anyway, so like I say, he was holding his ground a bit more than I expected, which was, in my opinion, giving Canelo the opportunity to land more body shots than he would have been able to if Billy Joe was moving on his toes a bit more. But that's the approach they took. I think he should have moved a bit more, but that's in hindsight, that's what I think. So anyways, I gave Billy Joe Saunders the first round. Second round and third round, I thought Canelo, he landed the better work. His defense was pretty good. He was keeping Billy Joe from landing, even though Billy Joe was still hitting him with the jab, but I felt like Canelo was able to counter, landing the cleaner, harder shots both to the head and body. But Billy Joe was still trying to outwork him in the round, but I liked the work that Canelo did in those 2 rounds. In the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, I gave all those rounds to Billy Joe. All 4 of those rounds I gave to Billy. I thought he was using the jab really well. I thought it was landing on Canelo. I thought it was pretty effective. I also liked he was landing, the left hand more in those rounds, and he started to really get into a rhythm, started to gain a bit of confidence. He started to fight with his hands down a bit more when he felt a bit more relaxed in there. Like I say, he was gaining confidence. He was more fluid in those rounds as well when he started to fight a little bit more with his hands down. But I think it was in the second, third, or fourth round, one of the commentators, I believe it was Sergio Mora, he called out that Billy Joe was just getting missed by Canelo's counter. He was just countering with that right uppercut to the body and the head, and the body shots were landing. The right uppercut to the body had landed a couple times, but he had just missed a couple of right uppercuts to the head. And Sergio Mora had called that out, and that ended up being the shot in the 8th round that, fractured Billy Joe's eye socket and ended up, winning Canelo the fight. Now, like I said, I had it 5-3 to to Billy Joe Saunders. And I felt like Billy Joe Saunders was, he was doing well. There was a little bit of fatigue showing come the 8th round, but he even started off the 8th round well, in my opinion, up until the midpoint of the fight. Up until the midpoint of the 8th round, I thought he was winning that round until Canelo landed that right uppercut to the eye, which obviously changed the whole fight and ended the whole fight. So in my opinion, he was on the way to winning another round until Canelo landed that beautiful right uppercut counter, which ends the fight. But I feel like Canelo Alvarez, he had a solid performance, but at the same time, I felt he was losing the fight. I thought Billy Joe Saunders was boxing well. Like I said, I thought he could have shown a bit more movement, and he'd have kept out of Canelo's wheelhouse and danger zone a bit more, and maybe he wouldn't have got caught with that shot if he was moving a bit more. But Canelo was kind of cutting off the ring. In my opinion, he's still not that effective at cutting off the ring. I felt Billy Joe, never really got stuck on the ropes because of Canelo's angles of cutting off the ring. So I'm still not, to be honest, too impressed with Canelo's cutting off of the ring and his footwork. It has improved a little bit, but I still think it's a weak point in his game, and I think it can still be, used against him in his next fight against Caleb Plant, which is the rumor who he's going to be fighting next. Now, I think, I don't want to say Canelo got a little bit lucky in this fight because, he landed a perfectly timed, beautiful counter uppercut that ended the fight. So, he threw the shot. He had been looking for that shot the whole fight. But, if it didn't fracture Billy Joe's eye socket, I feel like Billy Joe was, going to go the distance at least. And now maybe he wouldn't have got the decision. I think we would have been on our way to witnessing another robbery, judging by the judges' ridiculous scorecards, which were completely ridiculous in my opinion. There were a couple of really clear rounds for Billy Joe in the middle of the fight. I think it was like the 5th, 6th rounds. They were extremely clear rounds for Billy Joe Saunders, and I looked at the judges' scorecards, and 2 of the judges didn't even give Billy Joe any of those rounds. So, in my opinion, that's completely ridiculous. And even if Billy Joe had, continued or hadn't got caught with that shot to the eye and had made it the distance, or had fought through that, because some people were saying that he should have come out the corner for at least one more round, see how it went, gone into a bit of survival mode, clinching, moving more, get on your bike a bit more, throwing the jab even more than he was, which I think he should have been doing, using the jab a bit more than he already was. But some people feel like he should have continued the fight. I was shocked when, they pulled him out of the fight like that. I was shocked because, I'd seen the comments he had made when guys like Daniel Dubois had quit, and I believed that Billy Joe Saunders was not the type of guy to quit on an injury like that. I really thought he would have tried to at least fight through it for a couple more rounds. But in hindsight, it definitely was the right decision, because even if he had fought through it to go the distance, he had ended up getting, robbed or lost on the cards, however you see it. So, in my opinion, it was the right decision from Mark Tibbs. It ended up blowing my bets out the water because I, the fight to go the distance and Billy Joe Saunders to win. So it ended up messing me over badly. But I think in hindsight, it's definitely the right decision to have pulled him out, because the judges weren't giving him hardly any of the rounds anyway. But like I say, with Canelo, I feel like if that shot hadn't had ended the fight, I feel like Canelo he was under a bit of stress in there. To me, he was looking like he didn't really have much else that he could do, and in my opinion, that's still a problem for his next fight against Caleb Plant. I think Caleb Plant's going to give him big trouble, because I think he's a bigger super middleweight than Billy Joe is. He's taller, he's faster. He might have better defense. He's got really good reflexes. I think he'll definitely move more than Billy Joe Saunders did in this fight. He's also a lot more dedicated and hungry than Billy Joe Saunders is. I mean, Billy Joe Saunders hasn't been the most active fighter, for the past 4 years or so. He's blown up in weight. Caleb Plant always stays in shape. He's been active. He's younger. He's fresher. He's hungrier. So like I say, he moves really well. Good defense. Good jab. He's taller. He might even hit a little bit harder than Billy Joe Saunders. So I think Canelo Alvarez's next fight is really going to be a hard fight for him, because I think he was in trouble in this fight, in my opinion. In my opinion, if this fight was in England or Ireland, and we had local judges from England or Ireland, I think the scorecards would have looked completely different, and I think Canelo Alvarez would have been in a world of trouble, because had that fight gone to the cards, in my opinion, and like I say, if it was in a different country, I think he would have been behind on the cards, and he'd have been desperate for a knockout. And I don't want to say it was lucky, but it's not a common thing that somebody lands a shot and the person's cheekbone or eye socket breaks. It's not a common thing. We've seen it about 2 or 3 times over the past few years, so it's definitely not a common thing. And up until that point, Billy Joe Saunders was taking Canelo Alvarez's best shots with no problem. He took straight right hands, uppercuts to the head and face throughout this fight. Now, it wasn't, he wasn't getting teed off on continuously, but I mean, he had taken Canelo Alvarez's best shots through this fight, a couple times, and he wasn't getting wobbled by any of the shots. He wasn't falling down or having to take a knee from the body shots, so in my opinion, Canelo got a little bit of a get out of jail free card with that, happening. Billy Joe's suffering a couple bone fractures or whatever in his face, and Canelo Alvarez getting out of the fight that way. That's not a common thing. So I also don't want to say it's lucky, though, because it was a perfectly timed counter uppercut that he had been looking for throughout the fight. But like I say, in my opinion, Caleb Plant's going to give him all he can handle in his next fight, and I'm leaning towards Caleb Plant to win that fight, because in my opinion, Billy Joe Saunders was winning this fight, until that freak injury happened. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the fight. Maybe you think it's just sour grapes or whatever you guys think, but let me know what you guys thought. Did you think Billy Joe Saunders was in the fight? Did you think he quit? Did you think Canelo was, ahead in the fight? Let me know how you guys saw the fight going, and let me know who you guys want to see Canelo fight next. If it's Caleb Plant, let me know who you think is going to win that fight. In my opinion, I think Caleb Plant's going to be, a very hard night's work for Canelo Alvarez. But thanks for listening, guys. Talk to you guys again soon. Cheers.